Hello, my name is Fidelma Brady and I am the Education Specialist with Down Syndrome Ireland. I would like to welcome you to this information presentation on literacy and numeracy development at primary school, one of a series of information sessions that will be available for you online over the coming weeks. Due to the impact of COVID-19, we are unable to physically engage with schools, teachers or parents for the foreseeable future. Therefore, I hope this presentation will be a support for both parents and teachers alike in the development of literacy and numeracy skills for the child with Down syndrome at primary school. We will start by looking at the teaching of literacy and examining how we teach children to read and access books. Many children with Down syndrome can learn to read, and they understand the printed words from as early as 2 or 3 years of age. Printed words seem easier to remember than spoken words, and that is reflected on children with Down syndrome being very much visual learners. They do not learn very well by purely auditory means. Therefore, printed words are an extremely good way of enhancing their learning. In teaching literacy, we must have a plan, we must have a comprehensive programme. And literacy teaching covers the areas that are listed on the slide: book reading, sight word learning, developing letter sound knowledge and phonics and phonological awareness, the development of comprehension skills, the development of language, and the development of spellings and writing. Firstly, when we look at book reading, we need to expose the child to a wide range of books. Please ensure that books have both words and sentences, even from a very early age. We should not just give children just picture books. We need to have the words there to encourage them to learn to read. Books on aspects of the school curriculum will be very valuable going forward. And of course, personal books about the child's life and interests will always be a great source of interest for the child, because they will be the ones developing the books themselves. Books must be age appropriate for the child, but at their language level, not at their chronological age. Books are a very useful means of assessment. By looking at the number of books and the level of books the child has read, we can gauge what progress they have made. By repeating reading and repeated reading, the child is having a chance to promote their fluency, their comprehension skills. It gives them an element of success, and it also provides them with enjoyment. Research has shown consistently over a number of years that the only way to teach a child with Down syndrome to read in their early years is through whole word sight recognition. However, before we start the actual process of learning to read words, we must ensure that the child understands the meaning of between about 50 to 100 words. In addition, the child must be able to match and select pictures. Activities here should include matching, selecting, naming pictures, and also using their comprehension skills to answer questions we might pose to them. Once we are confident that the child is building up a repertoire of words they recognise in print, we can start to assemble and read sentences, continuing to use pictures of the words as prompts for as long as is necessary. There are suggestions on the slide as to what words to use. Family names, character names are always very useful and very popular. In addition, it's very interesting to note that some children will retain trickier words and be able to read trickier words with greater ease than they will be able to read some of the day-to-day words we use in our daily lives. Once we have that done and accomplished that and made sentences, we can move on then towards using a reading book. Acquiring letter sound knowledge is important for the development of the child's phonics skills. A structured program should be used for this, and most schools have such a program in their repertoire. An example of this would be Jolly Phonics. Teaching letter sound knowledge uses the same activities as sight word learning: matching, pointing, selecting, naming, and so forth. When we look at phonics and phonological awareness, while we do not use this method to teach reading to children with Down syndrome, we do give the child the opportunity to work with sounds and match those sounds to letters, a skill they will need going forward. This is done in two ways: by listening to sounds and by linking letters to sounds. In listening to sounds, we use visual supports along with the listening activities. We use pictures, illustrations, or concrete objects. When we come to the teaching of phonemes, this also demands the ability to listen to sounds. The child will need to discriminate between the beginning sound of a word and the end sound of a word. They will need to blend sounds in words, or they will need to segment or break up sounds in words. Sometimes it's nice to have a fun element here and use a toy or a puppet to do the sound talk with them. The second aspect of phonics and phonological awareness training is linking letters and sounds. In this area, we need to be very cognizant of the way we pronounce the letters. Research in this area is inconclusive, but we do need to bear in mind the risk of confusion. An ideal example of this would be, do we say the letter A or do we say the letter A? There is a growing tendency to pronounce the letter A as A. While this essentially is not wrong, we must realise that, for instance, when we spell the word cat or say the word cat, we say k-at. That's at odds if we pronounce the letter A as A, because all of a sudden we're saying k-it, and that is not the word cat. We do not pronounce cat as Kate. So be cognizant of the fact that we must try not to add confusion, and you're better to name the letter according to the sound. The area of comprehension can be problematic for children with Down syndrome. So therefore, to try to give them the best experience possible, we need to use their visual strengths. Use visual prompts consistently. We should also remember that by working on their comprehension skills, we are also benefiting the acquisition of vocabulary for the child and the acquisition of grammar skills for the child. Teachers should model and should scaffold the child in comprehension skills, should model the questions, should model answering the questions. All of this will serve to support the child's comprehension and understanding. Looking at the development of language, it's clear that both reading and writing activities support the development of vocabulary, the development of grammar, and the development of language. Identifying word meanings. Matching, ordering, and choosing words can lead to filling in sentences, which in turn leads to writing with support and then on to independent writing. We use words in all written and spoken sentences. My colleague Nicola Hart has a presentation, also online, on the development of speech and language skills. So she will be going into this area in much more detail, more so than I will be doing here. This is just a brief overview of language. Spellings should always be targeted alongside reading activities. So we should never use a standalone spelling program like Spellbound or Starways for a child with Down syndrome. The child's spellings should be their reading, words they have been reading. So sight words, words they're using to build letters and sounds, and also words that come from their book reading. In teaching the child with Down syndrome to spell, we use the look, say, cover, write, and check method. Handwriting is always taught as a separate activity. When we are asking the children to write creatively, we do not pull them up and stop them because they're making their letters wrong. That is not the time to teach handwriting. We are trying to let the child express themselves. We need to teach handwriting separately. And many children with Down syndrome do have difficulties with handwriting due to the impact of low muscle tone on their motor skill development. If the child still continues to struggle with handwriting, even at an early stage, first or second class, touch typing should be introduced as an option for the child. And there are many extremely good touch typing programs out there. One that springs to mind is DanceMat, which is available as a free download, and it keeps records of the child's progress. And it's a fun approach to touch typing and can be used both at home and at school. So general guidelines then. Let's make reading fun. Let's not make it a chore. Practice, repetition will all help. Monitor and record achievements and progress. We do need to realise that it will be in much slower steps, and we will need to persevere with it, because children with Down syndrome will not make the same progress as their typically developing peers at the same rate and in the same time frame. It is important that we continue to actively teach reading to children with Down syndrome right throughout their primary school and indeed into their post-primary school years. This is vitally important. Reading makes language visible to the child. Print is something that's always available. They can go back and read something they've read already that they liked. They can go back and read something that they wrote themselves. And in regard to teaching of reading, teaching methods are very simple, and they are as relevant in special classes as they are in mainstream classes, as they are in primary school, as they are in post-primary school. All children with Down syndrome, regardless of their age, will benefit from reading activities. We're now going to move on to looking at the development of number and maths skills. Children with Down syndrome, they enjoy numbers, but most do find them difficult to work with. There's very little research out there as to why this is the case, but some research points to issues with language delay, and the delay in children's working memory will influence the development of their number. We need to start teaching number by teaching vocabulary and the basic concepts. And this is the basis for all number teaching and for all following maths teaching that we may do. This is where we start. We start with the shape words and the colour words. Then we move to the size words. Then we combine shape, colour and size. Then we start to look at order words. First, second, last, next. And then we start to look at comparison words based on the shape, colour and size words we have already covered. So for instance, the red square is bigger than the green triangle, and so forth. To develop these skills, we need to play a lot of matching and sorting games and have a lot of matching and sorting activities. We need to build and use shape bricks and other concrete materials. In teaching number, we really need to make sure that we make full use of visual methods. Try to relate the teaching of number to skills in everyday life. Remember, the child will not just acquire the language of number, we will have to actively teach it. We will have to teach the child to say the number words. They will have to learn to say it. We must always bear in mind too that learning the count sequence is a challenge, as memorising for a child with Down syndrome is extremely difficult. Lots and lots of practice, and especially when we introduce new words and concepts. Never be afraid of overlearning in maths, because that's how it will stay. In starting to teach number, we first of all need to master the principles of counting. And that's the order there is on the slide. We need to have one-to-one correspondence. The order irrelevance, the cardinality of number, the construction of number, what we used to call the story of number. This is the start. This is the basis for all maths and number learning. And if children do not get these 6 areas, there is no point in progressing really until they do. Now, all of these take time. This can take 5 to 7 years for typically developing children until they're maybe 5, 6, 7, maybe going in senior infants into first class. It will take a lot longer for children with Down syndrome. But please remember, we need to stick with it until they've grasped it. Because if not, we're wasting our time moving forward. From then, we need to look at the numbers 1 to 5 first. And I have seen many occasions where children are counting to 40 and counting to 50, counting to 100. But realistically, that child has no concept as to what made up the number 3. So we need to start and actually consolidate the numbers 1 to 5. And there's the outline on the page for you, on the slide for you, sorry. The child starts off by recognizing 1, 2 and 3. Figuring out that adding 1 to 2 gives 3. Taking 1 from 3 gives 2. So the composition and the decomposition of 2 and 3. In other words, the story of 2, the story of 3. This essentially is leading to simple addition and subtraction. You then work with 4. You work with 5 in the same way. So at the end of that, the child, let's just look at the story of 5. The child will know that 1 plus 4 is 5. 4 plus 1 is 5. 3 plus 2 is 5. 2 plus 3 is 5. 5 plus 0 is 5. And then the opposite with subtraction. 5 take away 4 is 1. 5 take away 1 is 4. The story of 5. And please remember, this is vital. The child must have 100% knowledge of this before we start moving on, talking about 6 to 10 or 20 or 30, etc. It's vital to move slowly, steadily, and carefully through this stage. So, activities to teach counting and number that we've just outlined. Visual supports, the number line, lots and lots of games, lots of practice. I've said to you already, don't ever be afraid of overlearning when we're dealing with numeracy. Playing counting games, singing songs, using display. Again, linear board games is important because remember, we are trying to get the order of number correct. So think about board games that we know. Very often they go 1 to 10 along the bottom. Then the second line up, they go right back to the left-hand side of the board and start 11 to 20. While we're trying to tell a child that we go on, counting on, counting on. That's why we use always a number line preferable to a 100 square for a child with Down syndrome. Because if you think of the makeup of a 100 square, it's 1 to 10 across the top. And then we shoot right back again to the left-hand side of the square and we start with 11. Where's the consistency there? Where's the continuation there? Always use a number line for children with Down syndrome as opposed to a 100 square. Number of kits out there and programs out there to teach the number basics. And remember, both of these are resources. They're used to support children as they learn number. Numicon should never be used as a standalone teaching method. It's a resource. It supports the teaching of number. There's some research that's starting to show that children that use Numicon only are starting to have difficulty with the generalization of number. They just see 3 as the 3 shape. They don't have a concept of 3 as being 3 of anything. So be aware of that. Numicon, where it's an extremely good visual spatial means of learning, it's used alongside the traditional way we learn to count. Counting spoons out of the drawer, counting cups out of the press, setting the table with knives and forks, one for this person, one for that person. All of the means are used together in support of the child's numeracy development. A little word of caution about wall freezes. And I suppose as a teacher myself, I've been as guilty as anybody else of having beautiful, brightly coloured wall freezes. But realistically, for children with Down syndrome, pictures should always be the same and they should preferably be in the same colour. Their level of understanding isn't such that they can figure out that one beautifully coloured red teddy bear moving to 2 lovely trees, to 3 nice footballs, to 4 dolls' prams, that we're actually counting on. What they need is the same. So they need a lovely teddy bear. In the second one, we have 2 lovely teddy bears. The third one, 3 lovely teddy bears. The pictures must be the same. Because for the child with Down syndrome, if the picture is not the same, they do not get the concept of counting on, adding on. In looking at number, and I've said already, as we look at 1 to 5, we are actually working on simple addition without formalising it. We do need then to move towards teaching addition. So we move from counting all to counting on. And that's where the number line comes in, that's where the games comes in, and so forth. We visually support counting on with numerals, and we visually support counting on the number line. And that's very important to remember that. Realistically, what level of maths knowledge do children with Down syndrome need to have? Or do many children with special educational needs need to have? What is necessary for life skill development? We need to be able to calculate, to add, subtract, multiply and divide. But we use a calculator. And as soon as the child gets into double figures, as soon as we have to start using the concept of tens and units, we need to get that child used to using a calculator. Both forms of calculator a proper calculator as you would have in school, but the child also needs to be familiarised with using a calculator on a phone, for example. There's not too many of us walking around with calculators in our pockets, but we do use our phones. We do need to give the child a concept of time. Digital time is preferable because realistically that's what we see. Look at any notice board, airports, bus terminals, skybox on your television, your microwave, your cooker. It's digital time. That's what we see. The concept of AM and PM is too difficult for children with Down syndrome. And a great example of that is if we say 9:45 AM. To get a child with Down syndrome to understand that that's actually a 9:45 in the morning. There's no mention of a quarter. They don't see anything written down about 10. What they see is 9:45 AM. And yet we say something completely different. And remember, this is an issue for many children, not just children with Down syndrome. We need to look at money, and we need to give some practice with simple fractions, purely from the point of view of life skills again, that the child will know what is half a pizza or a quarter of a pizza. Now again, please bear in mind that children are all different and there will be wide variations in the ability of students, and this must be taken into account. Some children with Down syndrome will be able for more in the maths field, but just use this as a basic framework and either go back or go on from there. Unfortunately, there is no easy, quick fix for teaching about money. It takes time and patience. We also have the issues with the coin size, and that can be very problematic because in our euros at the moment, our 5-cent coin is bigger than the 10-cent coin, and yet we're expecting a child to realise that that's actually the smaller amount. So we look at it from the point of view of shopping and what's the next biggest amount I need. I would suggest you start with notes, or with coins, sorry, the €1, the €2, and then the notes, the €5, and then work from there. So that when the child has shopping, they calculate it on their calculator what the total is, and then see what's the amount that they need to hand to the shopkeeper. That's a very simple starting point for children, and they will develop as they grow older. And practice, actual hands-on practice in shops, working with money, dealing with money, will be of great benefit here. Time, again, as I've mentioned a few minutes ago, it's a slow process and a lot of patience is needed. Time certainly would be considered long-term learning. Try and relate time to the events in the day. The child needs to learn to tell the time, and the child needs to wear a watch. There are fewer and fewer children now wearing watches, and really the advantage of a child, particularly a child with Down syndrome, who will be very, very anxious about times and routine, having a digital watch on their wrist will be most beneficial. We have the option of the digital, analog, 24-hour clock. I've already said, stick with the digital. Some children work well with the 12-hour and just repeating it, or other children work and cope quite well with the 24-hour clock. Remember, time also covers things such as the calendar. So days need to be known, weeks, months, and so on. We also, in the process of teaching time, we need to teach the language for time. Today, tomorrow, yesterday, on Thursday, I will. And the passing of time can be problematic for children with Down syndrome. It's a concept they don't get very easily. The concept of way in the future, or the present, or the past. And that is something we have to pay attention. Again, just like the board games, a calendar should be in a long continuous strip, not the traditional square format. because in the traditional format, we have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then what do? We skip back to the left again to Monday. So it should be a continuous Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all in a long strip. Some of the longer calendars now you see that are in portrait style are better from that regard. Number does challenge most students with Down syndrome. Children will need support for measurement, for doing mental calculations, and for problem solving. And that is why we place such an emphasis on the simple skills of add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Using a calculator will alleviate a lot of the problems within the problem solving once the child has the concept of keying in the numbers on the calculator. Again, as early as possible, get the child used to using coins and using money. And the more we can link maths to everyday life and make it relevant, the more beneficial it will be. There are 3 very useful booklets on the Down Syndrome Ireland website, supporting children with Down syndrome in special school, in primary school, and in post-primary school. And all 3 booklets have very good sections on the development of literacy and numeracy. All 3 booklets are available as a free download from the Down Syndrome Ireland website. This has been a presentation on literacy and numeracy, and it's part of an overall suite of presentations that we have developed. These will all be available online over the coming weeks. I will be presenting the green section, and my colleague Nicola Hart will be developing the red sections and the seminars with the red list. Our contact details are listed on this slide, together with the Down Syndrome Ireland address for the website, where you will find a number of useful resources, including the ones I've mentioned a short while ago. And all resources are available as a free download. And please feel free to contact either Nicola or myself if you have any queries at all going forward. As always, I would like to acknowledge Professor Sue Buckley, whose research and vast expertise continues to inform my work with Down Syndrome Ireland. I'd just like to thank you now for availing of this presentation, and please do check on our website for the resources I have mentioned. Bye-bye for now.